Hey guys, Michael here with the Bookmark. Thank you for tuning in. As you can see, this is my very first virtual and live book review. First and foremost, thank you for bearing with me throughout this current read of mine. I know it took me more than a month to get through due to transition into summer and getting acclimated with my summer internship position. But, here we are. I finally finished the book and I'm ready to talk about it. So, without further ado, let's get started. So as you can see, my current read for the past month or so has been Under the Banner of Heaven, a story of violent faith by Jon Krakauer. This book is based on the events that occurred on July 24th, 1984. On this day, two brothers, Ron and Dan Lafferty, murdered their sister-in-law and niece, Brenda and Erica Lafferty, apparently due to a revelation that they were given from God. Apparently, to their statements after being apprehended, they stated that the reason for committing such acts was because it was something God instructed them to do. So, before we dive right into it, let me just give you a little bit of a background as to when this book was published. So, Jon Krakauer published his book in 2003, and his main motivation for doing so was to expand the Islam-focused understanding of religious extremism that pretty much dominated the United States after the events of 9/11. His book addresses fundamentalism and the violence that accompanies it through a different context, and that context is the Mormon faith. In his book, he has a tendency to jump from century to century. So different timelines, you can say, or different parts of a timeline. With the 20th century being the time where the Lafferty brothers committed their acts, and the 19th century talking about the foundation and formulation of the Mormon faith and what it eventually grew to today. So he tells his story in parallel by discussing the history of Joseph Smith and the founding of his church, along with the modern day extremist offshoots that embrace Mormon beliefs but do not belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. One example that he uses throughout his book to compare between different jumps or timelines were the Lafferty brother murders in 1984 and the Mountain Meadows Massacre in 1857. This Mountain Meadows Massacre was committed by Mormons and members of the Pius tribe, which is a Native American tribe. Through talking about this comparison and throughout the rest of his novel, Krakauer argues that all consuming religious faith is antithetical basically to rational behavior. And so by comparing the historical roots of religion to some of its modern day incarnations, Krakauer is able to ask larger questions about the nature of unwavering faith. He's also able to ask us to consider what our country's dedication to the idea of freedom of religion means in the face of this kind of extremist faith. And in doing so, he ponders the motives of the Lafferty brothers and their claims to have spoken to God, and wonders if we consider them mentally ill, and if we do consider them mentally ill, does that mean that all people who claim to have communicated with God are mentally ill? One thing that I really enjoyed about reading Jon Krakauer's novel is his organization and structure. I'm not gonna lie, going into selecting this book for the very first time, I thought it was gonna be more based on the murder events that happened in 1984. This book is, organized religion category, but because of the events that happened, I was assuming it'd be more into like a mystery thriller. So actually, when looking for the book, I had spent like an hour trying to find it in the mystery and thriller section when actually it was over in the religion section at Barnes & Noble's. my main inspiration for wanting to read the book and dive deeper into the background of Mormon faith and tie it to the Lafferty brother murder events was because of the upcoming show at the time with Andrew Garfield and Daisy Jones. There is a show about the 1984 murders starring Andrew Garfield and Daisy Jones up on Hulu. Definitely recommend that. It was really great. But yeah, seeing the advertisements to that show is what really pushed me to wanting to dive deeper into the book. But like I said, going into reading it, I initially thought it was going to be about the murders, but it's not just about the murders. Crocker does talk about the Lafferty brother murders, but he talks about the 19th century and the foundation of the Mormon faith and ties it into the events that occurred later in the 20th century. So overall, towards the end of the book, throughout the book, I was like, okay, it's a lot of jumping back and forth, but at the end, it all makes sense and adds up and provides a better context and understanding of the events that happened and provided sufficient background as to the faith and helped me better understand the idea of extremist, faith and beliefs that were going on in this book. So again, this book was really great read. I know it took me a month to get through, but there's a lot of going back and forth, so a lot of it was just rereading pages, so I got a better understanding. But this book is very unique. It definitely is an eye-opener in terms of, faith overall, generally. And it definitely changed my perspective in terms of, believing in, just that overall religious aspect, you can say. But overall, Crocker definitely did a fantastic job with this book. I highly recommend this book, primarily because of how he structures it. It's not just about the murders. It goes back into the history of the establishment of Mormon faith. That just makes his storytelling even more profound, in my opinion. So yes, definitely recommend. It was a great read. Loved it from start to finish. So whenever you at Barnes & Noble's, Target, and you happen to want to try something different, a different read, this is definitely one to consider. It's not just mystery and thriller. There is reason for why I found it in the religion category at Barnes & Noble's. But yeah, so without further ado, I hope you enjoyed this book review over Under the Banner of Heaven. It was very hard to not spoil anything in it. Believe me, I could sit here and talk on and on about detail from this book, but my job here is to get you guys to read it. But hopefully, with what I've shared today, it's been an eye-opener. Hope you consider checking it out. I definitely think you should. And other than that, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate your time. And have a great weekend. Have a great 4th of July. See you guys next time.